Hi, everybody. This is Gertrude Mache again here in cold, raining New Zealand. The weather has taken a turn for the worse today, but I'm really glad to be hosting yet another amazing woman. Cassie, thank you so much for coming on board and doing this interview.
I'm happy to be here.
And as you all know, this is the Her Story podcast, where I'm interviewing women from all over the world, sharing their stories. Please tell everybody who you are, where you're based, and I'll just love to hear more about your story.
Sure. I'm Cassie Premo Steele. I was born in Detroit in 1967, which was a time of much turbulence in the United States and in the city. So I'm 51 years old, and I live in South Carolina, which is deep in the American South. I am a writer, and I've published 16 books. My most recent one is called The Resistors, which takes themes from the Resist and Me Too movements and blends them with intersectional feminism. And my story, I think, began as a child. I was born of a marriage that had a lot of turbulence in it, just like Detroit did at the time. And so from the age of 8 on, my sister and I were raised by a single mom who was very smart. She was a philosopher. She was the first in her family to go to college, went on to get a PhD. My sister and I also went on to get our PhDs. And what was always important to me was love. And I defined love through writing and teaching, but most of all through mothering. I became a stepmother fairly young when I married, and then had my own daughter. And mothering them was a priority for me over my career. And I say that ironically because I also continued writing and teaching a lot and opening my own business and doing writing coaching. But deep in my heart, loving these girls was my most important thing. And then at the age of 45, I found myself in the middle of marriage and mothering, in love with a woman. Ooh. And I didn't expect it. It wasn't the sort of thing where I had always felt deep down that I was gay and in the closet or anything like that. It was that I had changed, and that my changing brought me to a place where I was a different person than I had been when I was younger, when I first started writing, when I first started mothering. And so it was very difficult. But as soon as I knew what was happening, I talked to my husband about it. I was honest with him. Right away, we worked out childcare arrangements, how things would go financially. It was incredibly peaceful, and yet at the same time, heartrending. I was raised Catholic, and it was ironic that it was on Good Friday that we sat down with the girls to tell them that the marriage would be ending and that I'm gay and that I would be with a woman. And they really reached out to him at that point to support him and to be there for him, which was incredibly painful. But it also, when I look back on it, it was a sign that as their mother, they could tell when I needed help and when I was strong and happy. And so even on this day of great heartbreak, I feel like I was at my best as a mother then, allowing them to kind of surround him with love and say, we'll help you get through this.
How did you navigate admitting or coming to terms with your sexuality? Because that's a very, very difficult place to be.
Yes, yes. I guess one thing that helped a lot was that when my mother came, it was near my birthday and also near Easter. And I sat her down, and she had brought me a ring for my birthday that looked like a wedding ring. And it was engraved on the inside with my name and my birth date. And I said to her, I can't believe you've brought me this today. And then I showed her my hand, and the wedding ring wasn't on it anymore.
Oh, wow.
And I told her what had happened. And she was just so unconditionally loving and supportive, and said, this is going to be hard. Divorces are hard. She had divorced our dad. She shared stories with me about what she went through in that. At the time, because she's very devout Catholic, she thought of the woman that would become my wife as my friend. And, didn't really want details beyond that. It was nice to have a friend.
Okay.
That was a blessing. It helped me a lot to have her love and support.
The
I
ring
guess,
is very symbolic,
yeah,
in that it kind of represented your self-love, you almost being married to yourself.
exactly,
Love yourself
exactly.
enough to be honest,
Yes,
those
yes,
around you and those that you cared for, and not live a life in denial.
yes. And, I've had women reach out to me since I've written about this, and obviously in the community, people know who I am now.
Mm.
And what I always say to them is, when you're honest with yourself and you come from that place of self-love, it's much easier than you fear.
Yeah.
So much easier. You're just surrounded by kind of a light, a presence when you trust yourself like that. When
A lot of
um,
to not be honest. It takes a lot of energy.
right. Yes. Yeah, because lying you're constantly leaking stories all over the place, and at the end of the day you're exhausted.
Yeah.
um so not every woman has a story as dramatic as that, but I do think many women lie to themselves in little tiny ways and don't speak up, and maybe come from a place of fear because they fear losing love,
Mm.
losing the home, losing the marriage, losing the children and the mothering, even in small ways, in a daily basis. If you're hungry, feed yourself.
Mm.
you know
Yeah.
a lot of times we don't do that.
Hmm. And have you managed to stay in touch with your stepdaughters?
Yeah, my stepdaughter, yes, is 30 now. In fact, she's married to a wonderful woman,
Oh,
and
wow.
they call Suzanne and me their mother outlaws, because we're not in-laws. We have no legal connection, but we're very close to them. And my daughter is now 18. She's away at school, in her first year of college. And yes, in fact, we get group texts regularly back and forth with each other. And um, because my daughter was 13 when it happened, there were a couple years, right, transitioning into the teenage years, plus all of this to deal
Yeah.
with, that was really hard. But she had this older sister who also kind of modeled for her what it was like to be a gay woman in the world, what it was like to grow up with divorced parents, because her parents had been divorced before I married her dad. And I think that helped my daughter a lot, to see that these things could be mediated and you can communicate with love and with honesty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Incredible story.
It is. It's kind of a happy ending that never ends.
Exactly. And the fact that you parted with your ex-husband amicably is
Yes.
incredible.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And he lives a mile away. And yeah, I think growing, I always said that my stepdaughter taught me how to be a mother, because when we move into a relationship where the partner already has a child,
Mm.
there are all kinds of stories about step monsters and fighting back and forth. But what I found was that boundary, I knew she wasn't my blood. So I knew I couldn't pass on whatever ghosts and demons were in my blood history. I couldn't pass on to her because I hadn't made the decision to bring her into this world. So
Mm.
she taught me to be patient. She taught me to put the work away when I picked her up from school. She was very encouraging early on in my writing career. When I would get rejected, she would say, Abraham Lincoln lost so many elections before he ever won one. So yeah, yeah.
Delightful. So one
Yes.
of the things I've been trying to do with this podcast series is to tap into the wisdom and the knowledge of all the women that I'm interviewing. If there is someone out there right now who's trying to make such a big decision like you did,
Mm-hmm.
what 3 nuggets of advice or wisdom would you impart to them this morning?
They all have to do with clear communication.
Mm-hmm.
So first, I would say find a way to be alone and spend time in prayer or meditation or walking outdoors or journaling in your journal. Communicate with yourself clearly first about what's happening. Tell the story and also feel the feelings. Because if you are not clear, if you're looking outside yourself, then the answer will never really come. It has to
Mm.
be
Has to
from,
come from inside.
yes, it really does.
Mm.
Um, and if you have a belief in God or Buddha or a higher power who cares for you, then that inner communication can be spiritual as well. The second thing is find a good friend to tell the whole story to from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a woman friend, and I remember sitting in my backyard with her, and she just listened to the whole thing. And then she took a deep breath and she said, Cassie, your children shouldn't be your most important partner.
Oh, wow.
And part of what I had to learn was what it meant to prioritize mothering, but also have a love relationship in your life that is the most important.
Wow.
So
That was
that was a
nice.
lesson.
Mm,
Yeah.
very.
And then the third communication is to communicate clearly with the people that you love
Mm,
and be honest and do whatever you can do to stay calm. If you need to use a mediator, to work out things as you're separating, you can do that. If you and your new partner need individual or couples therapy as you're negotiating things, you can also rely on that.
mm-hmm.
I went to a therapist who is such a beloved person in my life as I was going through this. And actually, her advice to me was to not tell my husband at the time and to take it slow and to see if this relationship worked out. And she was saying it out of protection for me. I'm
Yeah.
sure she had seen many women whose husbands responded with anger and vengeance and all of that. And I said to her at the time, are you telling me to lie?
Mm.
And she said, yeah, I think I am. And I said, well, I think I'm not going to do that.
Oh, wow. You were very, very clear what you wanted.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
important. That's why you were saying you have to take the time to
Right.
be with yourself and get clear.
Yeah. For
What?
me, that comes from writing, but I think every woman has a practice that does that. It could be yoga, it could be painting, it could be music, something that connects you to your creative spirit.
Mm.
I think is where you can get clear.
Wow. And you've written a book about this experience?
I've written 16 books. Many of the books are poems, yes, about this experience. One of the books of poetry has the name Beautiful Waters, and that's about my honeymoon in Oregon. The most recent novel is fiction, and that's The Resistors. And the main character is a 15-year-old girl who has two moms. So her biological mom and then the other mom. And of course, I was writing it while my own daughter was a teenager and pulling from many of the experiences that we've gone through as a family. But it's a novel because, of course, it has drama and excitement in it that aren't really in everyday life.
Okay. Oh, how fascinating. And did you paint the picture on the cover? Because I can see it behind you there.
Yes, my friend Amy Alley did that. She
Okay.
is a native artist who also lives in South Carolina, and the main character is a Native American girl. And actually, what starts the story rolling is that her mother has been taken to a detention center because, as part of a new policy, fictional policy, um, she's not considered a pure citizen because she's a member of the Cherokee Nation. And so the girl goes to her other mom and her mom's friends to find out, how can I help my mom under this president, under this policy with my mom in detention. She ends up deciding to make a plan to kill the president. So
you are
again,
living in interesting times. Any writer
yes.
in America right now?
Yes, exactly. But there's also, I'll show you, there's also art in the
Okay.
novel that my friend Amy Alley did as well. She's a fabulous artist. And so we co-created this book together. From the very beginning, I said, I am not Native. And so, I don't want, as a white woman, for this to be just my voice. I want to know, for example, she told me that Spearfinger is one of her favorite Cherokee stories. And so I did a lot of research into that. We talked about it, and that's woven all throughout. And the art also has the influences of Spearfinger. And so that's been really wonderful to be able to we've co-created on other things before, but this is kind of our first book together.
Fantastic. Well, good luck with the book, and thank you
Thank you
for this morning to do the interview. I'd love to stay in touch with you and hear how things are going.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Cassie.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.